Hello, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, good morning, Lloyd.
Good
Good
morning.
morning, Shay.
Shay, Jonathan, Melissa.
Oh, I think you're muted,
Hey,
Lloyd.
everyone.
You're not hearing me, I gather.
No, we can hear you, Lloyd.
Okay.
I can hear you.
All right. So Jonathan said I was muted, but very good. Let me see.
All right. I don't know. I still can't hear you, Lloyd.
But others can hear me. That's strange.
Yeah, we can hear you well. I can hear Jonathan too. Jonathan, can you hear me?
Perhaps not.
Yeah.
Can somebody give me a thumbs up if you can hear me?
I hear you,
Okay.
but you're not hearing us, I gather.
Okay. It appears that I may not be able to hear anybody else.
Good morning, Drew.
Morning, Lloyd. Morning, everyone.
Morning, Tracy. Morning, Danielle.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It has to be rainy on the first day of the state fair, I think. Isn't that the tradition?
Not much of a fair goer myself.
My wife and I try to go at least for one afternoon a year. At the rate we're going, it looks like maybe the last day of the fair this year. We'll see. Enjoy the gardens.
I think given we haven't had it in a couple of years, people are really looking forward to it. So
Yeah,
it makes for a rainy start though.
yep, for sure. Didn't they have it last year? I know they didn't have it in 2020, but
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think I went last year.
yeah. I think
Okay.
so.
Yeah.
Anyway. Looks like we're still trying to get Jonathan connected to sound. Jonathan, any connections? Well, good morning, Andrea. Good morning, Ruby.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Desha.
Hello. Sorry about that. I clicked the wrong link.
Oh, you're good. We're still trying to get our chair connected to audio. Oh, some technical challenges. Good morning, Shante.
Good morning.
Good morning, Colin. Ruby or
Morning.
Melissa, do we have a quorum? We have a quorum. Thank you.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
We hear you, Jonathan.
Okay, I have no idea what's going on, but technology.
Yeah, it's great.
Do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do.
We do have a quorum. Okay, terrific. All right, thanks for everyone's patience with me while I try to figure out how to get onto the meeting. Welcome to everybody to October's Performance Management Subcommittee meeting. As always, we have a pretty busy schedule here. First thing we are going to do is take a look at the minutes from June and September's meetings. Does anybody have any suggestion or have any corrections or edits that need to be made for June or September's meeting minutes? There's only one O in my last name on June. I know it's silly, but I apologize. No, not at all. Not at all. And which set of meetings is that? Is it the September ones? June. June. Okay. Any edits for the September meetings? Okay. So I would recommend that we vote on the June meeting minutes. Looking at the September ones, I do need to go back and make some additional edits on that one. Let's see, we have a question from Lloyd about whether the August minutes were approved. Let's see.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we went back and did June because it literally was a word from word what everyone said. And it ended up being about 10 pages long. So we went back to make it more action forward. So that's why June is just now being presented, because we had to kind of narrow everything down.
Okay. All right. So it looks like we just need maybe in the September minutes, a little more specific wording under number one about the motion was to adopt August meetings minutes, which were in fact approved.
Okay.
And as I said, looking things over again, there's a few things that I want to go back as the chair and double check on the September meeting minutes. And I'd like to bring those back before the group for the next meeting. However, if anyone does feel prepared to adopt June's meetings minutes, I would certainly be happy to entertain a motion for those.
I'll motion to approve June's minutes with the correction of Drew's spelling.
Second.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion by Danielle to adopt the minutes with the corrected spelling of Drew's last name, and a second from Drew as well. Any other edits? All right, if we could just vote in the chat box here to adopt June's meeting minutes. Okay. Meeting minutes are approved for June's meeting. Thank you to everybody, and especially thank you to Shay for working so hard on these. And before we move forward, I do see one face that I do not recognize, and that is Miss Dasha Shanks. If you would kindly just tell us who you are and who you're with. Love to welcome you.
Hi, my name is Deja Shanks. I'm a new project specialist at NCCEH under Andrea in the data center. Yeah, I've been here for about almost 2 months, and I've been learning a lot and been enjoying every minute of it.
Terrific. Well, welcome. And it's good to have Andrea back as well. I think it's been a couple meetings since you've been here, so it's good to have you back. All right. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our next agenda item, which is the implementation of the performance benchmarks that we adopted back in March of this year. And so for this, I'm going to go ahead and turn that over to Lloyd to give us some background, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good morning, everyone. Lloyd Schmeidler with Community Development. Yeah, so the benchmarks and the relevant measures were adopted by the HSAC on recommendation of this committee in March of 2022, and the department as the lead agency is getting around to proposing a plan for getting input from the projects on how they are performing. And our proposal is that we ask all participating projects in the Durham COC of the relevant project types to submit data twice a year, semi-annually. The first 6 months we would align the reporting periods with the federal fiscal year. So the first reporting period would be for the period of October 1st through March 31st. And once we get standard implementation of reporting going, we would anticipate that projects would be expected to submit information for that 6-month period in April and May of the year. And then at the end of the federal fiscal year, the reporting period would be for the entire federal fiscal year of October 1st through September 30th. And we would look to have that reporting done in October and November of each year. Would be a little late getting this started this year since we haven't yet approved this committee hasn't approved a whole process and the tool. For the tool, I can basically we've taken many of the measures from the existing COC performance evaluation tool that we've used for permanent housing projects. We've added some, especially for street outreach, but they're largely the same kind of formulas that have been in the performance evaluation tool for COC funded permanent housing projects for the last 2 or 3 years. And so we have set up reporting tool that would help projects understand how to calculate the the performance on the various measures for that particular project type. Melissa, our coordinator of the team, is also working to set up forms in Smartsheet to allow organizations, managers to simply put the numbers into a Smartsheet, and it would automatically calculate the results. You may recall the various project types have a different number of reporting measures. Jonathan has pulled up the various various measures that were approved. There's 4 for street outreach, 3 each for emergency shelters serving families and single adults or adults without children. And then I think 5 or 6 for transitional housing, 4 for, okay, so 5 for transitional housing. What is it? 4 for rapid rehousing, and I believe 5 for permanent supportive housing measures. And so in the use of the Smartsheet form, the results would be automatically calculated. We would envision doing a training for projects, certainly, if not annually, at least here at the beginning, to try to get all of the projects using the Smartsheet form and doing their reporting. The basic report that would be used in HMIS would be the continuum of care annual performance report. So that would be standard, even if projects are not receiving COC funding, they can access that COC annual performance report. We also would be working with the Durham Crisis Response Center to get the same information from the reporting capability of their HMIS comparable database. So they would be expected to participate. We anticipate that, particularly as we get this underway, some projects may be reluctant or slow to provide the performance data, but we'd continue to work with them over the next couple of years to get into the practice of providing this performance data to the COC, and then we hope to include it in a dashboard on the COC website that would be publicly accessible to the community to report the performance on these particular benchmarks of all of our participating projects, at least in these 6 project types. So I think some decision points for the committee are around whether semi-annual reporting is sufficient. Does it meet our needs? Hopefully it's not seen as too much reporting, although we could consider simply going to an annual report rather than semi-annual. Probably the other option would be to consider quarterly reporting. But in terms of the frequency of the reporting, those I think would be the kind of the 3 options. The particular outcome measures and the benchmarks have been approved, and more than likely we would be establishing that which projects are meeting which measures or which benchmarks and which ones aren't, and potentially trying to work with them to look at how they could improve performance on the various measures. You may note that on some of the measures, we looked at previous performance of the particular reporting group and on some measures relaxed the standard based on the community-wide reporting. And on others, we increased the benchmark because projects were already, at least as a group, exceeding what had been the standard. That would be an introduction. Jonathan, if there's any questions from you or other members of the committee, we can certainly talk about them. Melissa may be ready to share a screenshot or of this smart sheet form that would be used to at least do the reporting for at least one of the project types.
If I may also just add a little bit to the introduction here. Does everybody remember these benchmarks in this discussion we had back in March? Maybe, sort of.
Vaguely,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
vaguely.
Okay. So let me add this as well. One of the things that this committee has talked about is that, for the most part, the evaluating that we have been done has been around funding cycles. And so we've been looking for ways to evaluate all of our projects, regardless of whether they're in a funding process or not, and to be able to periodically monitor them. Now, the benchmarks is something that we have, to help us figure out how we're doing. And so in terms of this proposal here, what we're looking at is establishing, a sort of a process, a way to evaluate everybody outside of the funding cycles. And so that we can have a better idea in our reporting to the larger HSAC about how our system is performing. So that's where we're going with this. I realize it has been some time since we talked about these benchmarks, but that's the whole purpose of this. It's to help us better monitor the overall system in a way that isn't necessarily tied to a funding cycle.
Yeah, and I would add, Jonathan,
Does anybody
also that
go
it
ahead.
I would add it's a responsibility of the committee in the COC governance charter to monitor the performance of our projects, not just those that are funded by the COC or emergency solutions grants, but all of our project types. And Andrea from the data centers added her support of the data centers full support in the chat. She says it's the best practice to help agencies connect with their data by running and submitting their own performance reports to the COC. So they take ownership of their performance as well. And if they're, reporting it regularly to the COC and to this committee, hopefully they're paying a little more attention to how their projects are performing.
And it should make it easier for us as a committee to, since we'll have this data coming in, it should, I think, open up for more discussion and more review. In a way, I think that is possible. Yes, and as Andrea said, so much easier. So let me open up and ask if there are any other questions or comments at this point.
I just have a comment. I just think anything that encourages transparency among the COC is great. I think it can only help. I don't know.
Yeah, I would add that I think this is a good way to evaluate whether or not projects are meeting benchmarks or targets outside of a funding cycle. It just gives insight and maybe probably better informs the city, if not how to assist them with technical assistance or helping them to facilitate maybe HUD facilitating some assistance that they may need. Are these, and give me the timeline again, are these done biannually or annually right now? Is that what we're discussing, whether or not they will continue on the same schedule?
So this would be in addition to the reporting that is part of the semi-annual evaluation of COC-funded permanent housing projects. So essentially, if the committee approves the proposed reporting schedule of having projects report for the periods of October through March and then October through September on a semi-annual basis, COC-funded permanent housing projects would be I believe, reporting essentially on a quarterly basis, twice a year for the I think July through December period, and then July through June, in addition to these two periods of October through March and then October through September. Did that answer your question, Tracy?
Yes, it did. So biannually sounds like.
Right. This would be semi-annual for all of the project types listed, the 6 project types that have performance measures identified. So twice a year for this process.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Other questions, comments? I do have one question. I assume that Lloyd, you and your team feel that 2 times a year is very doable. I mean, I know that there's also there are staff considerations to take into account. I assume in suggesting that's workable for you all.
We believe so. We're hoping to streamline it as much as we can using the Smart Sheet. Hopefully will automate a lot of the reporting. There will still be some compiling work that may need to be done. We're going to be looking to see how we can streamline those processes and make them as easy as possible for us to reduce the labor commitment.
And Andrea has a question.
Yeah, I just would also add that, for HMIS participating agencies, it's really the expectation that folks are running a APR, reviewing their data at least once a month. Best practice would be more like a weekly basis. But so I think semi-annually is really really adequate to kind of have that check-in and also orient agencies to reviewing this data, because right now the data center and the COC is not able to verify that folks are really looking at their data every month and kind of staying on top of that data entry. It could be more frequent is what I'd say.
All right, Lloyd, what's our next steps here? I think you said you were about to have, I think it was Melissa put up something on the screen for us.
Yeah, Melissa, are you prepared to show the Smart Sheet form?
Yes, I am. Let me go ahead and share my screen.
Maybe Jonathan, you can stop sharing the measures. There you go. Thank you.
So I've started creating this performance reporting tool dashboard, essentially, where it kind of gives an introduction to this semi-annual reporting that's being talked about. And then there's also the reference document. So all of the benchmarks that we saw on the previous document that Lloyd shared, it would be linked here just as a reference material for all of the providers. And then we do want to try to simplify the process for providers. So instead of it being them having to actually manually enter onto the actual report itself and calculate the formulas. We were thinking of instead having it be like a form that they would complete. So they can put their organization name, the project name, and depending on the benchmarks or the measures that are being evaluated for their performance evaluation, they'll just put the amounts there. The form will tell them where to find it on their annual report. So it'll, if they go into their HMIS, COC, APR, it'll show exactly where they can find the information they need to put on the form. And then I've also added a file upload section so that they can actually include their COC APR document on this form. Now, their APR document will not appear on the actual report at the end, but it will serve as reference material for us so that we can, verify that numbers are correct and kind of do some cleanup if necessary. But this should simplify the process so that projects aren't having to sift through their entire COC APRs trying to figure out where things are. Instead, the form will tell them exactly where to go, and they're just looking for specific bits of information that are pertinent to the projects that are getting evaluated. And then once the form is submitted, they'll get this little response. And then they will have the ability to get their responses sent to their email, which, we would go over a training with the provider so that they know what this process looks like. And I would recommend that they, send their responses to themselves just so that they can have a record on their end as well. And then once that form is completed, it'll pour into a report where all of the providers will show up on the same report for that project type. So this report is specific to emergency shelter. And this could be helpful for the performance management committee and the COC if we're trying to see like overall how we're looking in terms of emergency shelter projects. And because they'll all filter into one report at the end.
So, and Melissa, were you suggesting in our conversation that links to these summary reports also could be embedded into the Durham COC website?
Right, so that we can do that. So if we wanted to make these publicly available, we can do that. The only thing when it comes to Smartsheets is that Smartsheets does require a login, but you don't have to pay for like Smartsheet access, but you would have to create some kind of login in order to actually view the report. So, we would go over that with providers as well, just in case, they have people who don't have a Smartsheets access who want to view the report. They'll still be able to access it. They'll just have to create a login.
Very good.
Were there any questions about the dashboard or any comments even? This is, I'll be very honest, this is my first time really digging into Smartsheets. I gave myself some training to get as much information as possible. So if you guys have any feedback, I'd be open to it.
Is this similar to the smart sheet that's used for the ESG projects that the state uses for those applications?
For like by name list, if we're talking about like the by name list that a lot of the providers use, then yes. So a similar process, just trying to simplify it a little bit because the form wouldn't be asking for a ton of data elements. It would maybe be asking between, I think it ranges from 3 to 5 measures per project type.
Okay, and if the form, what the smart sheet would be made available on the Durham COC, it wouldn't be password protected. It would be be readily available for the public to review if they wanted to review it.
So I can chime in here, Tracy. Yes and no. Like the smart sheet, depending on how it's set up, and Melissa, you'll correct me if you did you set it up as a form that would be filled out?
Right. So the form in my mind would only be available to the providers. So
Right.
no, a random person wouldn't be able to like submit a form and, potentially, mess up the data. But
Sure.
the reports, I think, are what we're discussing making publicly available.
So what would happen, Tracy, is the form is kind of the front end. And when it gets populated, and it is similar to, I think, the way the state ESG application is done through Smartsheet, the form is completed by the provider and that data dumps into a back end. Essentially, it looks like a giant Excel spreadsheet. In order to share that Excel spreadsheet, because that Excel spreadsheet, you can manipulate the data and sort and filter and do all sorts of things on it. That particular sheet would have to have sharing permissions. I'm not sure that we would share the sheet itself out of Smartsheet. We may look at exporting it into an Excel sheet that would become saved as a PDF that could be posted publicly. Just because the way that, in order for the public to get into it, to get to that sheet, people would have to send in requests to access that sheet. And we would have to give specific permissions to specific email addresses for a view-only license, which kind of gets really tricky for a public-facing dashboard. If we were going to complete a dashboard, we may export it to an Excel sheet and then consolidate it down to the most useful information and get rid of, unnecessary fields so that it's actually a very user-friendly, oh, here's the performance benchmark, here was the outcome, rather than all the little other pieces that would need to necessarily be looked at by this committee, for instance. The public isn't going to, those are things I think we can talk through and figure out what is the best format to put them. But the hope would be, yes, these could be part of a public facing dashboard when these are completed, that we could put those on the website and people could go look at, oh, how are folks doing on meeting benchmarks? And the community should be able to see how each agency is performing. Does that help?
Yeah, that does. I mean, I was thinking about, more aggregate data, higher level, and if they needed granular, details of a report, they could definitely contact the city for that type of information, but maybe more or less an aggregate data overview of the information shared with the public, among other providers, as well as just being transparent about the performance overall for a lot of the projects within the community.
So I think there's two pieces to it. So the Performance Management Committee is looking at a project by project benchmark achievement piece. The Policy and Planning Committee is looking at all emergency shelter aggregate data. So we've got two committees looking at data in different ways. This committee's focus is on individual projects with individual agencies. Then the rest, and part of the reason we're doing this twice a year is it will help us ensure that we've got really clean data that gets moved into our longitudinal system analysis that is submitted to HUD once a year. And it takes a long time to clean it up and do the data quality. So our thought is we could go in and have folks doing this at least once at the 6-month mark, and then once at the end of the year, so that we're not having as much data cleanup in the short period of time we have before the longitudinal system analysis is due to HUD. And then that longitudinal system analysis is where these individual project data gets rolled up into as an emergency shelter system in the continuum of care. Here are the outcomes. So we'll have the data both ways. We'll have it as a system and on the individual project level.
And those will coincide with your other reports and timelines for funding, which we're saying along with the other conversation, we're not just looking at projects around project application period or funding cycle. We're looking at them from another kind of viewpoint throughout the year to whether or not they're meeting benchmarks.
Correct. Sort of what we're doing is, how we do currently, we look at our COC funded projects the same way we're planning to do this twice a year. we look at our COC projects for performance management mid-year and as we're getting ready to start the COC renewal application. So this is kind of doing the same thing, but for the non-COC funded projects. This is looking at our data through the ESG funded or dedicated housing funds that go towards and CDBG funds that go towards emergency shelter, case management, rapid rehousing, street outreach, and some of our non-COC funded projects, transitional housing, which is more of a grant per diem through TROSA and other providers.
Okay, so this will be for non-COC funded projects.
Correct.
Okay, I'm glad you clarified it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking overall, all the projects that are funded through the COC. So that makes better sense. Okay.
Yeah, so we're already doing this for the HUD Continuum of Care NOFO funded projects. The thought was we're doing this for our HUD NOFO projects, but we really ought to be looking at all of these, and performance management agreed that, yeah, that kind of makes sense. We shouldn't be only looking at what the HUD COC funds are looking at performance management, because as a system, we're graded by HUD as an overall system. So we need a mechanism in place to sort of track at least the most important high level outcomes. There's a gazillion outcomes we could track, but the time it would take to do that on a quarterly or even biannual basis is a little bit more than we could do. So we kind of picked, here are the ones that are the most important to us as a continuum of care. We're going to report on all of them to HUD, but here are the ones that we really want to really stay focused on, because if we do really well on these, the other littler ones that HUD is also interested in should fall in place, and we should see positive outcomes on those as well.
Being chair here and being mindful of our time limits, and as well as our other items on the agenda, I want to go ahead and just ask Lloyd, as our staff person, what you all may need from this committee today or upcoming in terms of making this happen, making this become a reality.
Yeah, so I think we want approval of the overall process and approach that the department is planning to use for the performance evaluation of these projects in these specific project types. We want approval for the semi-annual evaluation, as well as those semi-annual evaluation periods, as well as the process of asking for the reporting to be submitted via a smart sheet form, and approval to provide some kind of public facing dashboard for this information, not just at the aggregate level, but also at the individual project level.
And just a clarification on the individual level. So we're talking about sharing individual data about a project and organization's performance publicly on that website.
Correct. Right. The organization would be listed, as well as the specific project. For example, Housing for New Hopes, COC funded rapid rehousing one project. The performance on the 4 benchmarks for rapid rehousing would be reported. The performance of housing of Open Table Ministries street outreach project that uses the HMIS on the 4 measures for applicable to street outreach projects would be reported to the community as well.
My gut tells me that, given that this is information about each individual project and organization, that we may want to talk to some of those to our COC members about that before we vote on that. But that's just sort of my gut here. I know we have several representatives of projects in here. I would love to hear your thought on that particular point, because it is data about your organization or your project. Is that something that you all would be comfortable with? And maybe it's not a big deal. That was just sort of my gut reaction. If nobody has any strong feelings on that.
Jonathan, I'm just asking for clarification. You're saying informing those non CFC funded projects about this process before it's kind of given to the HSAC to approve?
Yeah, my concern would be us, approving a vote to publicly share data about each individual project's performance on a website without having maybe consulted those projects first, maybe built, some, relationship with them. My gut tells me that if we were to vote on that particular point today without, consulting projects to say, here's why we're doing this, without having done some sort of outreach, that might not be received well.
Well, the reason I was asking is because as publicly funded projects with taxpayer dollars, this is all subject for public review from one aspect to the other. I think maybe some type of agreement or consent may probably be along the lines of helping them to understand a part of accepting the types of funds to undergird their projects, but also having something in writing from them around the consent or an agreement to publicly have this shared on the COC's website may make it easier for them, or easier, I guess, in terms of sharing this type of information.
I think you're
So
both.
it sounds like oh, go ahead, Colin.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so it sounds like, and this is why I was asking particularly our representatives of projects in here, it sounds like maybe this isn't that big of a deal, that you expect that at any time you could have to publish your data publicly.
I would say, I think you're both right. One, yes, we could publish this, all the contracts with all the outcomes go through city council, which, and those contracts that have gone through and been approved by city council in a public meeting have specific benchmarks and outcomes and are tied and refer back. So could you go out and post this without any consent and without telling people? Absolutely. Is it the best practice to do that? Probably not, because you don't want people to be like, oh, wait, I didn't know that was going to get published that way. So it's probably best to say, hey, let's go ahead and get the process started, and then have a consultation with the folks who are filling this out, saying, hey, after our first one, when our annually, maybe not the mid-year, but annually, we're going to publish the outcomes for a year. And then we may look at publishing the twice a year metrics, because, it's sort of, would you publish an interim report card, or would you publish the final report card once the contract ends, for lack of a better term? I think there's a conversation to be had with that, and sort of getting some input from that, and also making sure we, talk to the HSAC at large as well. So it's not just this committee saying this is what we're doing. It's really kind of seeking some input and guidance as towards of what and when, and looking at perhaps phasing the reporting piece in over time.
Okay. All right. That was, I think you summed it up well, Colin. I was concerned about us getting ahead of the projects.
Yeah,
So
John-
I think, you know, my concerns are alleviated, and I'm happy to hear a motion if anybody wants to make a motion. I can also summarize what that motion might look like if that would be helpful. So, and I'll go ahead and offer this. So as Lloyd, as our staff member was saying, they are hoping that we as the committee would adopt a motion to approve semi-annual evaluation periods for all of our COC projects through data input on the smart sheet, with public facing data to be published and determined how that will be at a later date. Does that sound pretty much like what we're needing here? No strong opinions today. My goodness.
So just basically agreeing to or trying to approve the semi-annual, and then we'll revisit whether or not how we publish. We know that we will publish, but how we publish the data for individual agencies, just to clarify.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So we'd be looking at to approve the process of a semi-annual evaluation process for all COC projects through data input on the smart sheet, with the publishing of some data to be determined how that will be at a later date.
Motion to adopt that. Yeah, because
Okay.
I think some more conversation is needed around this. So yeah, definitely.
I second
Okay.
that motion.
All right, so we have a motion from Shay and we have a second from Shantae. Any further discussion? Okay, if we will go ahead and vote in the chat box. Okay, any outstanding votes at this time? Okay, motion carries. All right, thank you everyone on that piece. Moving right along, our next agenda item is the cross COC Housing First evaluation of COC funded permanent housing projects. I was not here for this meeting back in June, but as I recall, looking over the minutes, we've initiated an agreement with some other COCs to, I think, do our review of their Housing First applications, and they do ours. As part of, I think, expanding and making the evaluation process more fair. Lloyd, I'm going to turn that over to you to go ahead and introduce.
Right, thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, so you'll recall also we did get the HSAC's approval to enter into cross COC evaluation of Housing First implementations of our COC funded permanent housing projects back in June. We are beginning a process of implementing that cross COC evaluation process, and the other COCs that would be participating would be our partners in Orange County, neighboring us on Durham on the west, and then Wake County on the east and southeast border of Durham counties in the Durham COC. Most of the projects that would be being evaluated would be in Wake County, although there are several in Durham. or excuse me, not only in Durham, but in Orange County as well. The vision is that we would have 3-person teams composed either of representatives from an organization that is implementing a COC-funded permanent housing project or community volunteers. And we're anticipating that the time commitment is going to be about perhaps 4 to 6 hours with 1 to 1.5 hours of training in the use of the tool. And then perhaps spending time reviewing the policies and procedures of a COC-funded permanent housing project or particular organizations COC-funded projects, and then hopefully site visits, preferably in person, depending on the comfort level of the participating team members. Those site visits could be done virtually rather than in person in the neighboring county, and then follow up with the committee to complete a team evaluation. We are at this point envisioning using the HUD recommended Housing First evaluation tool, which asks whether the whether the project says it's doing Housing First, whether it documents that it's using Housing First approaches in its policies and procedures, and then whether the project is actually implementing Housing First in the way it does business in the project. So the 3 questions are: does it say it, does it document it, and does it do it? And so the evaluation is intended to really go deeper than we've been able to do in Durham's evaluation of the Housing First implementation in our COC funded projects, because we've only been looking at how well Housing First approaches are documented in the policies and procedures of the particular projects that we have been evaluating. One thing we have not established as a COC, while we're committed to doing this, we've not established how the results of this cross COC evaluation would be incorporated into the 2023 evaluation, semi-annual evaluation of our COC funded permanent housing projects. So at this point, what we're particularly looking at is for interest from especially the members of this committee to participate as a member of an evaluation team. We have not yet made any. We're hoping to get teams established by the end of the calendar year. Probably really hoping to get teams formed by the end of November, with training of those teams completed by the end of the calendar year in December, and then the actual work of reviewing policies and procedures and completing site visits to determine how well projects say they're doing Housing First and how well they're actually doing Housing First, taking place in January of 2023, January and February of 2023, and then final kind of reports about the implementations being completed by the end of March to coincide with our kind of existing time frame for completing the first semi-annual evaluation of COC funded permanent housing projects in the spring and of 2023. So right now, what I'm particularly interested in is getting commitments from team members to participate as a member of a team. And I see Danielle, you're saying you're willing to assist with Orange County. We were not at this point forming teams to visit any particular agency or any one particular county. So could we keep it open whether you would be going to Orange or Wake County?
As a current member of Wake and also a former funded agency of Wake, I would not feel comfortable
Okay.
assisting in Wake.
Understand. Okay.
How many team members do we need?
Well, we I think are hoping to get as many as about 5 or 6 teams from Durham. We're hoping to have at least one for each of the organizations that currently have renewal projects, and those would be Housing for New Hope, Urban Ministries of Durham, and Alliance Health have permanent housing projects. We're hoping that we might get a team through the newly formed or the new project from at the LGBTQ Center, which was funded for the first time in 2020, in the 2021 competition. But if there's interest, we hope to get again 4, 5, or 6 teams formed from the Durham COC. And again, training
You
will
said
be
4
provided.
to 5, 6 teams? How many people on the
4.
teams?
Okay, so 3-member teams, and we'd hope to have 4 to 6 teams from Durham.
Okay.
I share the same
So we
sentiment.
probably need,
I'm sorry, I share the same sentiment as Danielle, as I've had former employment with Wake. So, but I would like to participate.
So to be
okay, so it
clear,
sounds like both Danielle and, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, to be clear, the evaluation would not be done of Wake County's implementation of Housing First. It would be specifically a specific site visit to a specific organization within Wake County. And I think they, I'm not sure how many organizations are implementing COC funded
Well, I
housing
think
projects.
the issue is both Danielle and I worked at the lead agency at some point in
Okay.
Wake, so I don't know if that would be a conflict. We both anticipate that it would be.
Okay, well, I appreciate your availability and interest, and we'll certainly do the best we can to, obviously, people will have the final say as to what organization and they are assigned to, but obviously we need there's going to be more opportunities to do site visits in Wake County, which is a much larger COC than Orange County. I think Orange County may only have 1 or 2 projects that would be participating or are receiving COC funding. But I appreciate the interest, and we'll put you down.
I'm happy to participate as well. I would prefer the site visits to be virtual just because it's a big time saver.
Sure.
When you can just log onto your computer. So that I'm happy to participate as well.
Very good. Thank you. Others?
I would be willing to participate as well, even though we have ties to the Raleigh Wake partnership, and working with them. I don't foresee it possibly being a conflict of interest, but if I cannot participate, Malcolm White will more than likely participate as well.
Okay, thank you.
I'm happy to as well, Lloyd, and I could
Very
probably recruit someone else if we need, other team members. We could split up, but
yeah, we're certainly going to be recruiting, from the entire COC membership, but we're particularly focused on certainly this committee, as well as the organizations that do have COC funded permanent housing projects, both rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing. Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Tracy. Anyone else? Good. Well, that's a good start. We appreciate people's willingness to participate. I think it'll be a good learning opportunity to learn more about how other organizations are implementing COC funded projects, and could be a real benefit not only for those organizations, but I think for the Durham COC and people's work on this committee as well. Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you to everybody. Thank you to everybody for stepping up and volunteering. It definitely will make the work easier, and I'm excited for all that we can learn too. Is there anything else on this piece of business, Lloyd, or was that the?
Not at this
that it?
time. That's it at this time. Thank you.
Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and move to our last piece of business on the agenda, which is a review of the 2022 annual competition and the initial planning for the 2023 competition. So I will turn that back over to you, Lloyd, for any comments you want to offer.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. So we submitted the COC annual consolidated application by HUD's deadline of September 30th. What I'm particularly interested in getting from the committee this morning is some feedback on the scorecards. I'm particularly interested in feedback from those committee members who were actually used both the new project application scorecard as well as the renewal evaluation scorecard. There's several questions I think I sent to Jonathan. One of the questions related to the specifically to new project applicants is how and whether we should incorporate performance, more clearly incorporate performance measures, measure evaluation into existing projects for new projects. The reason this is an issue is that there's some clear language in the in HUD's notice of funding availability that COCs in evaluating project applications should use objective measures as well as evaluating how well projects potentially would help the COC make positive improvements on the COC's overall system performance measures relative to things like reducing the numbers of people experiencing homelessness or reducing length of stay in homelessness, those kind of things. So we don't necessarily need to make firm decisions. We're not proposing any specific adoption of any specific new project scorecard at this time. But as we look towards the 2023 competition, we'd like to get some thinking and the thoughts of committee members as to whether we should propose, for example, with new project applicants, have some expectation that those new project applicants are already doing a project like they would be asking the COC to now fund, and so that we would expect that they would have some kind of annual performance data that we could evaluate when they are seeking new project funding. For example, if we go back to the initial discussion this morning, would we expect as a committee that a project that is asking for COC funds for a rapid rehousing project is already implementing a rapid rehousing project, perhaps using ESG funds or another source of funding? And so would it be reasonable to say that we could at least take a look at how they're performing on the performance benchmarks and outcomes that the COC has adopted, and incorporate some kind of evaluation of that into the new project application scorecard in 2023. the question, kind of the follow-up question would be then, what do we do as a COC and as a committee if we have new projects that, new project applications for projects that don't have any particular performance data to propose to us? So that's one set of questions regarding the new project application scorecard, and the second set would be around what modifications, if any, would the scoring committee or the committee as a whole recommend for the renewal evaluation, the scorecard for permanent housing renewals that we've been using. Any suggestion for improving that? One particular question I think I sent to Jonathan was whether we should do more to evaluate how well projects are serving people with high service needs. The detailed instructions have a whole long list of people experiencing homelessness with high service needs that could somehow be incorporated into our evaluation. So that's kind of the feedback we're seeking at this time, both as we look to the 2023 competition.
Thanks, Lloyd. And I did get your email. Unfortunately, I did not discover it until about 10:08 this morning. So
okay, sorry about that.
Not helpful on my end here, but
yep.
what I can do is I will be glad to circulate those documents over email to everybody after the meeting. But in general, go ahead and open up the floor for conversation for any reactions that folks have to the scoring process, or any concerns that they have that they think ought to be addressed or improved for 2023. So what thoughts or questions do we have here on the two items here that Lloyd mentioned? What to do about new applicants who have no data, and any thoughts on the scorecard that we did use for 2022, whether there's anything that you think ought to be changed.
I had a question about the scorecard. We had a lot of discussion about this before the review, I believe, of, was it ESG projects, or was it overall COC funded projects? And I'm wondering whether or not any of the feedback was taken into consideration or noted or documented in any way so that those changes could be made for next year.
So as I recall, committee member Sally Wilson made some suggestions or brought to light some concerns that I think put projects who were providing support services at a little bit of a scoring disadvantage in comparison to the housing projects that were just providing housing. And so those, if that's what you're recalling, that those concerns were adopted into the scorecard immediately. I forget exactly which competition that was. We had 3 of them, but I do recall that those were adjusted for that particular scorecard.
Okay, yes, that's what I was referring to. The discussion around those, whether or not they were implemented after that discussion, or whether or not they would be taken into consideration for next year.
Why don't we do this? Obviously, I was not able to get out these 2 documents to the committee. Perhaps what we could do is as I said, I would circulate them so that everybody would have a chance to review them. Lloyd, what would be a reasonable time frame for you all to incorporate new changes? I mean, when do you start your process of preparing for 2023?
Yeah, I think we have time to place this as an agenda item on the November meeting schedule and circulate it, by the end of the week, perhaps, or early next week, to the committee in preparation for discussions at the November meeting. I think, again, a big question is going to be how we incorporate information from the cross COC evaluation of Housing First into the renewal scorecard. But the other questions around adapting or including performance data into the new project application scorecard is a major concern, as well as the question around how we should perhaps do more to evaluate how renewals are serving people with high service needs and how we incorporate that into the scorecard. So those are, I think, the major questions that hopefully committee members could give some thought to over the next month and come prepared to have some discussion at the November meeting.
What would be, and I'm sorry, and I think you may have said it, but I think I missed it in my earpiece here. What would be our next meeting? Would be the 10th. What would be a specific date that any suggestions, so that you could incorporate them and then we could bring it up for discussion?
I think we'll want to approve the scorecard for 2023 probably at the December meeting. And so if it's really up to the committee if it wants to see a draft of the 2023 scorecard before December, then would want suggestions for improvement prior to the November meeting, so that we can present a draft to the committee at the November meeting and then to have perhaps feedback at the November meeting and then final approval made in December. So it's a question of the committee's preferences as to how it wants to consider the particularly the renewal scorecard. Did I help, or did I make the issue more confusing?
No. You so and I was just trying to figure out a specific date that I could put, that gives you all plenty of time. Let's see. So
since you're the chair, Jonathan, let me ask you this: would you want us to prepare to provide a draft of the 2023 renewal scorecard to the committee in November, or do you want to use part of the November meeting to discuss recommendations for the scorecard and then have a presentation of the draft of the scorecard for the committee's approval in December?
Here's what I think would be most helpful. I think that I would love for members to submit any feedback to you, and then I'd like to try to shape the discussion around whatever it is, 2 to 3 key issues. Given our time limits and given how the last meeting went when we did this, I think most of the work needs to be done individually in submitting our recommendations. And then if there are maybe 2 to 3 key issues that that maybe we need to address, I think that's how our best time would be best used. What I would like to try to avoid is going through every question line by line. What I learned from our last round is I think maybe that might have been a little bit too tedious, and really, given our limited time and resources, I think if we really need to be spending our time addressing the overall issue, if there is one. If there isn't, great. So what I'm going to ask is that folks review this on their own, submit any recommendations to you, and then you and I can identify any 2 or 3 points that we may need to discuss in further detail at November's meeting, with the hope that we have a final vote in December's meeting.
Okay. All right. Let me suggest then asking committee members to have feedback to you and me by October 30, by the end of the day on October 31st. And that will give us, I think, some adequate time to suggest revisions to the renewal scorecard at the November meeting. I will. I'll try to send you, Jonathan, by the end of the day on Monday, some specific questions for committee members to provide feedback on. Okay. Particularly related to the renewal scorecard, but also for the new project application. And the new project application scorecard doesn't need to be approved by the committee until next spring, in anticipation of the 2023 competition.
Okay.
So we have more time to focus to work with that.
Sounds good. Does that sound reasonable to everybody?
Yes, it does.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Good. Okay. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our agenda, and we're actually a little bit ahead of schedule. Is there any old business that anybody needs to bring up or needs to be revisited? Okay. Well, our next meeting is Thursday, November 10th. Unless there's anything else, if anybody, if we'd like to have a motion to adjourn followed by a second, we'll adjourn and see you all at the HSAC meeting for this month.
Very good.
Make a motion.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn by Shay. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
I'll second.
All right, second by Shantae, and it sounded like there was a third in there by somebody. Wood, are you raising your hand?
No,
Oh,
I was just
too.
waving. No, I was just waving goodbye to
Waving
everybody.
goodbye.
Before we go, the person that dialed in just for the attendance, if you could state your name or type your name in the chat for me.
It's me.
I believe that was Jonathan.
Oh,
That's
okay.
Jonathan. Yeah,
Hello, Jonathan.
yeah,
Okay.
I can see you all. I can hear you all on my computer, but I can't hear you. So I had to call in. So it's me.
No worries. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you, guys. You have a great day.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you to everybody for your great work. See you at the HSAC meeting.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.